My name is Rachel, and I was 34 years old when it all happened. It was Christmas dinner at my parents' house, and my 9-year-old daughter Emily was seated all by herself on a folding chair right next to the trash can. Nobody acted like it was strange, not even for a second. Everyone just carried on, laughing and talking, like this was totally normal. Emily sat there for a few minutes, quiet, trying her best to act like it didn't bother her. But then she stood up, walked straight across the room to me, and said, in this small but steady voice, "Mum, can you do the thing you said you'd do if it felt bad again?" I looked at her, my heart breaking, and I said yes. 5 minutes later, my mum started screaming, and if you've ever been betrayed by the very people who should have been your biggest supporters, you probably know exactly what that feels like. I'm married to Mark, and I'm the mum of Emily. I adopted her legally when she was 3 years old, but I've been in her life since she was just 2. To us, she's always been mine. We don't use the word step in our house, not because we're pretending, but because we're not. She calls me Mum, and every single time I hear it, it still feels like a little miracle in my chest, from the very beginning. I promised Emily she would never have to fight for her place in our family. I promised she would never feel like a guest in her own home. But that night at Christmas, sitting by the trash can, I realized I hadn't been able to keep that promise. Christmas at my parents' house was always over the top. My mum loved polished silverware, big themed centerpieces, and coordinating outfits for all the grandkids. She liked to say she was curating joy, but what that really meant was everyone had a part to play. And if you didn't fit the script, well then, you were the problem. We arrived right on time, me, Mark, and Emily. She wore the sweetest little red velvet dress with shiny gold buttons. She'd practiced walking in her new patent leather shoes all week because she didn't want to slip. She even carried a small gift box she had wrapped herself. It was for my mum. Glittery paper, a crooked ribbon, and one of those little tags in careful handwriting, to Grandma, from Emily. The kids' table was already set up when we walked in. Fancy plates, snowman cups, and little Christmas crackers wrapped in shiny foil at every seat. There was a hand-lettered name card. Every seat, except one dot at the very end, next to the swinging kitchen door, there was a folding chair. No card, no plate, no cracker. Just a napkin and a fork, pushed in right next to the trash can. It looked like somebody realized at the last second they needed one more chair, and instead of messing up the perfect look of the table, they shoved it there. Emily stopped walking. She just stood there, clutching her little gift box, staring. At the chair, no one said a word. My mum called across the room, smiling wide, "Oh good, you made it." We were just about to start. Mark squeezed my hand tightly, and Emily went and sat down. She smoothed her dress, tucked the gift under her chair, and tried to smile when her cousins laughed and shouted across the table. But I could see it in her face. She was holding back tears. I didn't speak right away. I just watched. I watched my sister snap pictures of her kids in their matching Christmas sweaters. I watched my mum brag about the floral centerpiece she made from scratch. I watched my dad sip his wine, looking everywhere but at Emily. And most of all, I watched Emily sit there, pretending it was fine. Then she stood up. She walked across the room, past 3 people who wouldn't even meet her eyes. She stopped at my chair and whispered, "Can you do the thing you said you'd do if it felt bad again?" I looked at her and I asked, "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." So I stood up. I tapped my glass and the room went silent. My mum turned to me, smiling like I was about to give a sweet speech about family togetherness. Instead, I raised my glass and said, "Here's to the last family event we'll ever attend." The whole room froze. My mum's smile faded instantly. My sister's mouth fell open like she thought I was joking. My dad just stared at his plate. I walked over to my parents' end of the table and placed a sealed envelope between their plates. "Merry Christmas," I said. Then I turned, took Emily's hand, and walked out. No one stopped us. No one followed. We were almost at the car when it happened. A scream. My mum's scream so loud the neighbor across the street peeked out through their blinds, but I didn't turn back. Emily didn't either. She never asked me what was in the envelope. Not that night, not the next morning. She didn't need to. She already knew it was the truth, sealed up and left behind. The morning after Christmas, we made pancakes. Emily asked if she could stir the batter. She poured in way too many chocolate chips and then laughed, calling it deliberate overkill. Mark laughed too, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something loosen in my chest. That's how Emily was. She didn't scream or throw fits when she was hurt. She just made it obvious in small, quiet ways. It would almost have been easier if she had exploded, but instead, she carried things on her own shoulders, like she expected to, and that broke me even more. You should know Emily wasn't some stranger my family barely knew. I'd been there. Since she was 2 years old, she used to call every woman Mama by mistake. The first time she reached for my hand in a parking lot, I almost forgot how to breathe. By the time she was 3, I was the one reading bedtime stories, cutting apples the way she liked, holding her after nightmares. When Mark and I got married, Emily was 4. She carried our rings down the aisle in her tiny hands and told me my shoelaces didn't match. She was right. When the adoption was finalized, Emily asked me if it meant we could finally have the same last name. I said yes. She grinned and said, "Okay, then it's real now." But to my family, it never was. Not really. To my family, Emily was never truly one of us. They didn't say it out loud. They didn't have to. It was in the small, cutting details. The ways they left her out without ever admitting it. Like the way my mum always introduced her as Mark's daughter at gatherings. Never mine. The way my sister would say, "your kid," instead of calling her Emily, almost like correcting people who dared to think otherwise. It was in the group photos, where she'd be called forward at the last second, like an afterthought, or the holiday. Cards that read to all the grandkids, but somehow only had 4 names listed inside. Emily's name was always missing. They didn't hate her. That would have been easier to point out. Instead, they erased her in soft, quiet ways, over and over again. And every year, I told myself they would come around, that people just needed time, that families needed adjustment. But Emily noticed. Kids always notice. She noticed when my mum bought all the cousins matching Christmas pajamas and gave her a plain red set with the tag half torn off. She noticed when her birthday was combined with her cousin's party, because it's easier that way. She noticed her name written in tiny letters squeezed into the corner of the cake. Like an afterthought, she noticed when she made a glittery Mother's Day card for my mum, and all she got back was a distracted smile and a complaint about how glitter gets everywhere. And I tried to explain it away. I told her they were forgetful, that it wasn't on purpose, that she shouldn't take it to heart. But kids are not stupid. They know when they're being managed, instead of being loved. One night, maybe a year ago, Emily asked me a question I still think about when I can't sleep. We were packing for a weekend trip, and she held up a sweater my mum had given her for Christmas. A hand-me-down, still had the tag on. I remembered it clearly because it was 2 sizes too small. Emily held it up, turned it over in her hands, and said, "They don't really know me, do they?" I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked. She shrugged. "They don't know my favorite color, or my size, or what I like. I think they just guess." I didn't have an answer. I sat there on the edge of the bed, my throat tight. She folded the sweater neatly, set it aside, and then she looked at me again. Is it like I'm not really your kid to them? That question broke me. Right then, I felt like I had failed her more than I ever had in my life. That night, I promised her something. I told her that if she ever felt unwelcome again, truly unwelcome, she could tell me, and I'd handle it. That she didn't have to shrink to fit someone else's version of family. That she wouldn't have to ask twice. She just had to. Say the word, and on Christmas, sitting by that trash can, she did. Which brings me back to the envelope. Inside was a photo, one taken the day her adoption was finalized. Emily was in a blue sundress, holding a stuffed turtle, sitting on my lap outside the courthouse. We both had chocolate on our faces, from the donuts she insisted on afterward. Mark had taken the picture. On the back of the photo, I had written, "This is the day we became a family. You just never treated her like it." Beneath the photo, there was a letter. No yelling, no insults, just truth. I told them I had noticed everything, that Emily had noticed too, that I wasn't asking for apologies anymore. I was drawing a line. I wrote that if they couldn't love my daughter as their own, then they didn't deserve to keep calling me theirs. And then came the invoices. Yes, I included a breakdown, a literal spreadsheet. Every contribution I'd made over the years. To joint gifts she was left out of. The money I'd put toward food and decorations for family events where she was sidelined. The checks I wrote to help cover their heating bills the same winters they forgot to include Emily's name on the family Christmas cards. I ended with this line. You used my money to build a version of this family that never included my daughter. That ends now. Mark hadn't read the letter before I gave it. Not because I hid it from him, but because he trusted me to say what needed to be said. And Emily never asked what it said. She trusted me too. She just knew I meant it. At first we heard nothing. No phone calls, no texts, no apologies. Just silence. Which, if you know my family, is almost laughable. These are the same people who once created a spreadsheet to organize Thanksgiving pies. The same people who send all caps group texts when someone forgets a birthday. Silence from them wasn't an accident. It was a tactic. For a moment, I thought maybe it would stay that way. Maybe they finally understood the weight of the letter. But of course, I was wrong. It started a week later. I was sitting at the kitchen table when I got a Venmo request from my sister. $450. The caption read, Owen's birthday, everyone pitching in, same as last year. Owen is her son. He was turning 10. We hadn't even been invited to the party. I knew that because Emily had seen the invite posted on his class bulletin board. It had candy canes, gold lettering, a dinosaur wearing a party hat, the kind of invitation you don't forget to send by accident. Still, they asked for money. I didn't pay it. I didn't even decline. I just left it sitting there. 3 days later, my mum emailed Mark. Not me, Mark. The subject line was simply, Reminder. Inside, she wrote that they hadn't received our usual contribution toward their winter heating bill. My parents live in the same house I grew up in, and for the last few years, I had quietly been helping them cover utilities. I never made it public. I never bragged. I just thought I was helping. But apparently, it was expected. Mark didn't reply. He just forwarded it to me and typed, I guess your mum's finally talking to us. I didn't respond either. Then the text started. First, from my sister. Hey, just wondering if you guys are still coming to Dad's birthday. Need a head count. For the cake, I assume Emily still likes vanilla. Or does she eat cake now? I stared at that one for a long time. The next morning, my mum texted me, Tiffany, I don't know what that letter was about, but this is getting ridiculous. Emily is welcome. She always has been. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Molehill, that was the word she chose. A molehill, as if seating a 9-year-old girl by the trash can on Christmas was nothing more than a small inconvenience. Didn't answer. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted to send her a picture of Emily's face at that table. I wanted to list every year, every slight, every careless comment. But I didn't, because I've learned that people determined to misunderstand, you will always find a way. So, I stayed quiet, and the silence started to rattle them. 2 weeks later, a card showed up in the mail. It was addressed to Emily. Inside was a photo of her with my parents at a pumpkin patch. She must have been about 5 years old. On the back, my mum had written, "You'll always be family. Love, Grandma." No apology, no explanation, just a sentence trying to rewrite the past. Emily opened it at the table. She stared at it for a long time, then flipped it over again. Finally, she said, "I don't think she ever called me that before." That night, I sat down with her and said softly, "You don't have to respond. You don't have to do anything." She nodded. I know. She didn't pin it to her bulletin board. She didn't put it in her drawer. She left it on the counter and went upstairs to bed. For a moment, I thought maybe this was how it would stay. Little pushes, little manipulations, their way of pulling us back in. But then, a few days later, there was a knock at the door. Mark looked through the peephole, then turned to me, his face pale. "It's your mum." I opened the door just enough to step outside and shut it behind me. My mum stood there smiling like nothing had ever happened, like we were neighbours catching up after a trip. "I just wanted to see Emily," she said. I didn't reply. I thought maybe we could talk, just the two of us, clear the air. "There's nothing to clear," I told her. She sighed, shaking her head like I was the one being unreasonable. "Rachel, this is ridiculous. She's just a child. She doesn't know what she's doing." "She knows exactly what she's doing," I said. "And so do you." Her eyes narrowed. "You're turning her against us." I laughed once, sharp. "No, you did that all by yourself." She tried to step forward, like she could push past. "Me, I'm her grandmother. I have a right to see her." I blocked the doorway. "No, you don't." Something shifted in her face then. The smile disappeared. Her eyes went cold. She looked at me like I was the stranger. "I raised you better than this," she hissed. "No," I told her. "You raised me to stay quiet. That's not the same thing." And with that, I went inside and locked the door. Mark was standing in the hallway, watching. He didn't need to ask what happened. He already knew. That night, we sat Emily down and told her it was official. No more family events. No more messages. No more maybe next time. We were done. She didn't argue. She didn't look sad. She just said, "Good." And that was it. Or at least we thought it was. Because something was coming. Something none of us expected. Something that would make everything else feel like the warm-up act. We thought the end came after Christmas. After the letter. After the silent treatment and the Venmo requests. After my mum showed up on our doorstep, smiling like nothing had happened. After Emily said good, with more clarity than I had ever heard from her. But then Eric showed up, Emily's biological father. I hadn't seen him in over 7 years. Not since the custody hearing where he lost all parental rights permanently and irrevocably. It wasn't even a close case. There had been a restraining order, years of court documents, testimony, a judge's ruling, and then silence. No calls. No letters. Nothing. Which was the point. He wasn't supposed to know where we lived. That was the whole reason we'd fought so hard for the adoption. For safety. For peace. And then, one Thursday afternoon, I opened the front door because I thought a package had arrived. And there he was. Older, rougher, but with the same look in his eyes. That looked like the whole world owed him something, and he had come. "To collect, Eric," I said. My body already tensing, my hand on the door. He smirked, or something close to it. "Heard you've been pretending you're her mum." My stomach turned. I don't know who told you where we live, I started. Your mum, he said casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. She reached out, said she was doing it for the good of the family, said she thought Emily might need her real mother. I didn't punch him. I didn't scream. I just stood there stunned, while my hands curled into fists at my sides. You have no rights, I said firmly. None. This conversation shouldn't even be happening. I've got rights if I want them, he shot back. And if I don't, well, maybe you'd rather keep it that way. And just like that, the real reason spilled out. It wasn't about Emily. It never was. It was about leverage, about money, about control. He glanced past me toward the front. Windows she here? I stepped outside fully and closed the door behind me. You need to leave. He crossed his arms. Look, I'm not trying to start trouble. I just think it's fair. I get to see her, or I get something else. At that moment, our neighbor Nora cracked her door across the street. She looked out and froze, her hand flying to her chest. Emily was halfway down the stairs inside. She saw Nora's face through the window and stopped. Go back upstairs, Nora whispered quickly through the crack. Eric hadn't noticed, thank God, but Emily had. She heard enough. I stepped forward, my voice low and firm. You need to get off this property. Now? He smirked again. Or what? So, I called the police. They showed up in under 10 minutes. But it was long enough. Long enough for him to talk. Long enough for him to spit out words I will never repeat. Long enough for Emily to hear enough from upstairs to later ask me, Mom, is that man going to take me away? That night, I sat on the edge of her bed, holding her hand. I pulled out the adoption certificate and showed it to her again. Your name is on this. Mine is on this. The judge's name is on this. His isn't. His never will be. Mark and I filed for a new protective order the very next morning. We printed everything. The old court rulings, the emails, the texts, the new police report. The judge granted it immediately. When I told my parents, I wasn't calm. I didn't sugarcoat it. I sent them one single message. You put Emily in danger. This isn't about feelings anymore. This is about safety. You made your choice. So, did we? They didn't reply, but a week later, my sister did. She texted, can't believe you'd destroy your own family over a mistake. A mistake. That's what she called it. I didn't answer. I just blocked her number. After Eric showed up, everything shifted. The letter, the money, the texts, the card, all of that seemed small compared to the look on Emily's face when she asked me if he could take her away. That look carved something out of me I'll never get back. So, we made a decision. One we had been avoiding for years. We moved. Not across town, not to another neighborhood. We left the state. It was harder than I thought it would be. Packing up a life doesn't just mean boxes. It means old school photos, dog-eared books, mugs you didn't realize you'd miss until you wrapped them in newspaper. It means walking through rooms one last time and wondering if you'll ever feel that safe again. But when I looked at Emily, when I saw the way she started flinching at the sound of cars slowing down in front of the house, I knew home isn't walls. Home is wherever she feels like she can breathe. We found a small place near the coast, a little two-bedroom with creaky floors and peeling paint on the porch railing. Nothing fancy, but from the moment we walked inside, Emily smiled. This one feels good, she said, and that was enough. We started fresh. New school, new neighbors, new routines. At first I worried she'd feel out of place again, the way she always had with my family. But she didn't. The kids at her new school didn't know her as the adopted one. They just knew her as Emily. The girl who loved drawing animals in the margins of her notebooks. The girl who could climb the jungle gym faster than anyone else. The girl who snorted when she laughed too hard. She belonged, and slowly I started to belong to Nora, our neighbor. Across the street, brought over lasagna the first night and didn't ask questions. At parent-teacher night, nobody looked at me sideways. When Emily introduced me as her mum, nobody hesitated. They just nodded, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That's when I realized something. For years, I had been fighting for my family to see her as mine, to see me as hers, to put us in the picture. But we didn't need them anymore. We had our own picture now. Months passed. Spring came, then summer. Life started to feel ordinary again, in the best possible way. And then, one evening in August, Emily came home with an envelope. "School project," she said, handing it to me. They told us to write an essay about family. I opened it carefully. Her handwriting was neat, careful. The first line read, "Family is not who you were born to. Family is who shows up." I had to stop there. My eyes blurred. She went on to write about the adoption, about how scared she had been when she thought she wouldn't belong anywhere, about the day the judge signed the papers, about the stuffed turtle she still kept by her bed. And then she wrote about us, about Saturday pancake mornings, about late-night movies with popcorn, about moving to the new house and painting her room seafoam green because it felt like a fresh start. The last line of her essay said, "Family isn't something you're given. It's something you build." And I know my mom built this one for me. I sat there with the paper in my hands, unable to breathe. Mark read it over my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I saw tears in his eyes too. Emily watched us carefully, chewing her lip. "Do you like it?" she asked. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice shaking, "it's the best thing I've ever read." She smiled then, shy but proud, and went upstairs to draw in her sketchbook. I kept the essay, folded in my nightstand. Not because I needed proof of what we had, but because sometimes it helps to have the reminder that we made it, that we chose each other, that we survived. Do I still think about my parents? Yes, of course I do. Some nights when the house is quiet and the waves crash outside, I wonder if they ever regret it, if they ever sit at their kitchen table and think about the seat that will always be empty now. But then I remember the look on Emily's face at Christmas, sitting by that trash can, and I know the answer doesn't matter, because we're not waiting anymore. We're not waiting for invitations, or for approval, or for love that should have been unconditional. We're not waiting for a place at their table. We built our own, and at that table, every seat is chosen with care. At that table, nobody is left out. At that table, Emily is not an afterthought. She is the reason the table exists at all. So when people ask me now what happened with my family, I tell them the truth. I tell them they made their choice, and I made mine, and mine will always be her, always.